Hey everyone, and welcome to our Immersive Experience panel at the Festival of Innovation. I'm very excited for our conversation today, and I'm pleased to introduce our panel. We have Vince Kadlubek, founder and director of Meowwolf, Neil Connolly, creative director at the Everywhere Group, and Kirin Sinha, founder and CEO of Illumix. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I think let's just jump right in. Vince, can you talk a little bit about what Meowwolf is up to at the moment? I mean, I feel like you're kind of continuously adding new experiences. So sort of what are you working on at the moment?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite to this. We are continuing to build exhibitions that, kind of take from what we did in Santa Fe 7 years ago, and continued in Vegas and in Denver. We just opened Dallas this past summer, and we're continuing on. For us, there's so many different ideas that we have when it comes to these like large scale immersive art experiences. There's so many different ways to express in immersive, and there's so many stories to tell, on kind of on that side of the company. And so we're really, crafting a large, Meowwolf universe kind of story arc that our exhibitions are going to start to be able to articulate, across the country, and also starting to look internationally. So yeah, we're in the process of, continue to figure out this business model. It's new, and I think we're right there. We're like right on the verge of kind of having a real understanding of what it is we do, what audiences are attracted to, and like what the kind of business model around it all, actually is. So
exciting. Well, I think, if you're looking for international locations, come over to the UK. I think that would be personally a great place to come. But yeah, I think
it's on our list for sure.
Fantastic. Neil, what are you kind of working on at the moment? And can you tell us a little bit about the award entry that you entered?
Sure. Thank you for having me. What we're working on at the moment, various different things. So shows in our portfolio that exist, Great Gatsby, Doctor Who, Peaky Blinders, more about that in a minute. Am I forgetting something? We're quite a diverse company because we present immersive shows, but we also have a classical wing to our company where we present immersive classical concerts, as well as also producing and developing West End musicals and shows. Choir of Man's running in town at the moment, and it's also in Tampa, Florida, doing a run there at the moment. And largely what we're up to what we're doing right now is licensing out those products, taking them to more international territories. So just building them at the moment. Secondary to that, we have also announced that we are taking on The Traitors, which was started in the Netherlands, I believe. It's made by a Danish television company. It's now active in 29 different territories. There's one in America. The BBC one's hosted by Claudia Winkleman. So we're turning that into a live experience. That's coming out next year. And Peppa Pig is also coming to the market next year as well. So we're making an immersive, playable theatre experience for little ones, which would probably make me the coolest stepdad in the UK right now. And everyone's going to want free tickets for me. So we're currently developing that. There's also a wealth of other productions, which I'm not at liberty to speak about because they've not been announced into the public market. But we've got quite a heavy pipeline for the next 3-5 years. And you know what it's all like. We all do the same thing. It's the magic triangle. You've got a show, you've got a venue, you've got money. You put all that together and you bring it to the market. So it's just closing off that factors of that. The awards, we were nominated in the brand realization and immersive event categories, and for Peaky Blinders: The Rise, which was, if you're familiar with it, it's a BBC, Netflix, iPlayer show. Quite big in the UK, North America, and the Gulf states. We ran it for just over a year and a bit. In the UK, in our Camden venue. I can talk about that a little bit later, but its purpose, It was great. It was pretty good. And then it transferred to Saudi Arabia, where it ran for 8 weeks as a part of Gamers 8, which is an interactive gaming festival. That's now stopped there, and it's going to have a life again soon, but marketing will shoot me if I say anything about it.
I have to say I'm so excited for the Traitors experience because my housemate and I were obsessed with the TV show last December. So I think it could potentially break up friendships, families. I think it's going to be a very kind of dangerous game to play, but that's the fun of it, you know? So, yeah, excited to see what that's like. Kirin, can you talk to us a little bit about what Illumix are working on at the moment and then the award entry that you entered?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do as a company is we're more of a technology play where we build highly precise digital layers on top of physical venues and experiences. So imagine going into a theme park, a stadium, even a live event, kind of like a fashion show or a resort, and basically having an experience through the phone or, you know, eventually through glasses that is completely personalized to you, where a character greets you, or maybe instead of being, you know, someone who's ultimately a visitor through this physical experience, you can become a protagonist. Maybe you have powers, maybe things are different because it's your birthday, maybe it's different because it's your third time back. How do we leverage a lot of what the digital world and gaming has given us into physical experience? And I think in terms of the gap and the change that we've seen in the market in the last year or two, we've now hit a demographic tipping point where the majority of the population is digital native. Like if you look at how younger people in particular today, the phone is an extension of the hand. Like when I look at my younger cousins, it's really incredible to see how they engage with the world is so, I think, fundamentally different than how older generations do. And I think there's a question of, there's no doubt that physical experience is still so important, possibly more important in this kind of heavily digital world. But how can we take something that is a core part of how they engage? The physical economy today is in part the sharing economy, and bringing in all of the value that we get from digital in terms of interactivity and immersion in a way that doesn't take away from physical experience, but adds to it. I'd love to talk more about the project. I'll say we are working with the largest theme parks in the world, one of the largest resort chains in the world. I'm under so many intense NDAs that I can almost literally say nothing at any given point unless I'm under an equally strong NDA. But we're working with these incredible brands and stories and IPs. And I think it's a really exciting moment in technology where we've gone from, frankly, right, AR being sort of like a technical gimmick or like an innovation check mark to something that, like what we've done with Illumix over the last 7 years, is we've developed technology that can enable these digital layers to centimeter level precision. What you're getting kind of off the shelf from Google is about 5 to 10 meters. We're doing it centimeter level, indoor, outdoor, you know, really any size, as small as like a little kid in front of you, all the way up to hypothetically like a giant castle, right? We can do it really at any scale. And I think that that's where we're seeing just a lot of excitement. We're taking all the air around you and all this kind of empty space. We're basically doubling people's real estate, right? And seeing what can you do if you could create twice as many attractions all of a sudden, and those could be different for different times of day and different seasons, and what might those physical experiences look like in that new era. And so it's just been I think a really exciting time for us as we scale kind of in immersive entertainment. And most recently, we've been expanding outside of that into, as I mentioned, resorts. We're working with some fashion brands now as a part of their, you know, shows. And so it's been really interesting to see this new canvas for creation, I think, come to life.
Yeah, I think actually that's a really interesting point, isn't it? About how actually these immersive experiences are kind of expanding outside of, you know, what people might think of as a traditional location for it. I mean, Vince, we were talking about this briefly beforehand, weren't we, about some of the entries into the Innovation Awards in this category. Actually, there's a real variety. You know, there's a lot of museum spaces. I think actually retail, it's a kind of really great place that retail could start using some of these immersive experiences. So I think it's an exciting time. And if we kind of talk, yeah, Vince, are you seeing that as kind of a trend, this kind of expansion of the definition?
I mean, yeah, I think that, like, obviously immersive is, you know, everybody's trying to figure out how folks can connect to story and connect to brands and various forms of IP, you know, and like, obviously, like, you know, the theme park industry has done this for a while, but like the ticket-based model is pretty great. It's a pretty great business model, and you can really only sell tickets to experiences, and so I think everyone's trying to kind of get into the game. And when I was going through the entries, that was what struck me, I think, the most, was just like how many different types of institutions were reaching into immersive programming to, obviously to attract guests, but also I think to try their best to tell the story that they're trying to tell. There's a bit of a double-edged sword here in a way, where like everyone wants to do immersive, as if immersive by itself is going to be the thing that touches the heart of consumers, and everybody wants to use technology as if the technology itself is the thing that's going to touch consumers. And there's a lot of like missing experience design and artistry. It's not about the technology, and it's not about the immersive environment, and like, what Kirin was saying about Gen Z and Alpha Gen and people who have grown up internet native. This is not just a technology thing. It's not just I have a phone in my hand. It's a psychological thing. It's how I look at the world and how I engage with the world. And what immersive does is it gives people the ability to interact in real life, in physical space, similarly how they interact on the internet. But if we're not thinking in those terms, then we're creating immersive exhibits or immersive experiences that are ultimately missing the mark, that are still just physical world things. They're not actually taking the learnings from what the internet has brought us, which is agency, which is like randomness, which is being able to control your experience and go any direction you want, like uncover any story you want to uncover. It's the like power that the internet has given us. It's the amount of like diverse content that is available on the internet. Like these are the things that people want to see inside of their immersive experience. So when you design an immersive experience, just thinking it's immersive, just thinking that it's technology that's going to touch the hearts of consumers, you're going to end up kind of creating like a very like limited and linear experience. You really have to think about like, what is the psychology of the consumer that's seeking out immersive experiences, and a lot of the entries, it's like, I'm like, where's the art? Like, where's the creative? Where's the like honoring the consumer as a person with free will and agency? It's like trying to pack like 20th century media into a 21st century form, and it kind of misses the mark.
Yeah, Kirin, do you kind of have that struggle, obviously being a kind of digital platform? Do you struggle to kind of, make sure that your clients and your guests are kind of having that agency in that story?
So I would say it's something that we think about a lot. I mean, first of all, I agree with everything Vince said. I mean, this is, I think, what made me so passionate about our space, this idea of, you're talking about agency. We always talk about it internally as being like the protagonist in the story, because we do, like, if you think about what the internet is today, everything is about you, right? Everything is about you. And there is this sense of discovery, and it is kind of inherently different to how we think about traditional physical experience and even, frankly, traditional media experiences. And so it's evolving that and giving people a tool set where it doesn't feel like we're using the technology check mark, but that it's actually giving them a new set of capabilities. And for us internally, one of the things we think about a lot is we are a technology company, but if the technology isn't leveraged correctly, you're not going to get those incredible results that we see from some of our clients when they do it right. And so we do have an internal creative arm. We build content and experiences internally, and we help create those bumpers and share our learnings, because sometimes there is an inherent, hey, I've got an idea, let's do this quest where you go from point 1 to 2 to 3. And we kind of have to pull back and say, maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe it's really about letting them go in the order they want and discovering and having different versions of this available, right? Which is what's so powerful about digital often. And so that is something we think about a lot as a business. As much as we are selling technology, we're also kind of working with us. You get all of the learning we've had for doing this for the past decade, and also, I think, really understanding what has been successful and what hasn't worked as well in this space.
Yeah. Neil, am I right in thinking that you have some sort of live actors in quite a lot of your experiences? How does that kind of then change this whole idea of kind of the guest having some control over their experience?
It's chaos is the short answer to that. I jest. So I think just before I cover off that point, I mean, I think it's, I love the fact that Vince is deciding to throw shade on what I would term as creative agencies or charlatans who are trying to operate in the immersive market, who win tenders and then go, oh, cool, we've got this really good thing to do this brand activation, but we don't actually have anybody in the company who can do what we said we were going to do. And then they shop around and they eventually call probably one of us. And they're like, yo, can you do the thing that we said that we were going to do? I'm like, yeah, fine. There's quite a lot of that going on at the moment. And also Kirin, it's really nice to meet you. I'm not much of a kind of technologist. I kind of like accidentally sometimes invent things when we're like developing shows. But I was having a problem recently with 3 different creatives that we've got in the workshop, like creative briefs, not people. And I sat there and I was like, I really just need this very specific piece of technology that may or may not exist. I'm not sure. And I needed to do this very specific thing. And then before this, I was researching Kirin's company and I was like, lads, I found the thing. Might end up calling you after this and be like, can we have a chat?
Let's chat. Oh, we've historically worked with like these really big companies because we wanted to come out with this big splash, and a lot of that will launch next year. But I think a lot of what this year is for us is working with everyone and anything of like, there's so many, and to Vince's point, there's so many new experiences coming out, I think, and that's been a huge change, I think, in the last 3 to 5 years in the industry. And I'm really excited about the democratization of these experiences that I think used to be controlled by, a handful of players.
Yeah. I mean, I might be actually a little bit guilty of that. I suppose to answer Alice's question, before I joined the Everywhere Group, which I only joined about 2.5 years ago, I worked for various different other companies. I also worked a lot freelance. And certainly in the build up to 2020, when the world just decided to stop and everyone had a bit more time to think, we were just, there was a connection of maniacs running around the UK, making any kind of experience that they really wanted to. The Arts Council never paid us any attention because they didn't understand what the format was, therefore wouldn't give us any funding. So like the punks of the 70s, we just had to figure out our own way to do it. And, we like creating jobs. We like paying people. It's a weird thing to kind of have a kink for, but you're like, I really love creating jobs. Here, go. And, if we can build a show and we create 70 jobs, great, we're really happy. But at the end of the day, you got to find a way to do it. So that's why we ended up just finding our own buildings, finding our own spaces, converting them into what we needed to do, whether it was a bar, a restaurant, show, an art exhibition. We kind of did anything and everything that we wanted. And a lot of original content, which was the exciting thing. And we were always trying to maybe access IP for the obviously advantages of being able to like marketing advantages, being able to retail tickets easier, a kind of a clearer connection in terms of brand penetration, as opposed to just, building an entire story in a person's mind far away from able to retail tickets to them. And I don't know what happened during 2020, but like our phones, like us and everyone else that's in the UK here connected, literally every single major television, film studio, everybody from the US, every major brand, everybody was like, can I have a location-based experience, please? Do you do immersive? And we're like, yes, hello. How do you do? It's great. It was absolutely crazy. And long may that continue. It's a really exciting time. Everybody's going to do it in different ways. Now, to really specifically answer Alice's question, yes, we are theatre makers. That's where we came from, ostensibly in the Everywhere Group. We like making shows. So everything that we do has live actors in it. They are not brand ambassadors like they are. With Peaky Blinders, they are the cast of the Peaky Blinders. Like we have a guy who plays Tommy Shelby. We have Arthur. We have Alfie Solomons. And it's ostensibly it's one of the things that people always talk about when they leave our experiences. They're just like, I have no idea how good like these performers would be. And it's really funny because especially in the UK, when you talk to traditional theatre makers, you know, a lot of big West End established houses or places like the National Theatre or the Bristol Old Vic or place like that, they always bang on about new audiences. They're like, we really need new audiences to come to see our shows, because people don't go to those theatres because they're often quite austere looking buildings that are slightly unwelcoming unless you kind of have the confidence to walk through the door. Whereas with immersive experiences, it's nothing but new audiences. It's people who would ordinarily never go to the theatre. They just kind of go, that's a really cool thing. And that's an experience that I want to do because I want to be a part of that. Because obviously people are more interested in experiences nowadays than material goods. And we're nothing but new audiences, which is incredibly exciting. And we constantly try and tap into a theatre audience because we are traditional theatre makers. And we have live actors, we have musicians, like we stage shows. It's just the fact that we do West End, Broadway type shows. Like we just did Gatsby in New York. We took over the ballroom of the Park Central Hotel, which is like a 1920s Art Deco hotel. Perfect. It was beautiful. Built a whole new staircase and entrance into the building. And we had it's not a theatre going audience, even though it's a show technically on Broadway. It's just ordinary people who are like, this is a cool thing to do. We use those actors in various different ways. Like Peaky Blinders had 3 different endings. And each ending was triggered by what the audience decided to do over a course of an evening. So each of the gangs, so you've got the Italian gang, the Jewish gang, and the Shelby gang. And they're all basically trying to make money in various different ways. But towards the end of the show, there's a fight sequence. And all the money is rounded up, and whichever gang has the most money triggers which one of the 3 endings it goes through to. So if the Shelbys have it, then we do the Shelbys ending, and that's just like a message that's flashed to the entire cast, so they don't know what ending they're doing until seconds before it actually happens. And one of the other things that we did in terms of that particular production, on the back end of it, was we make sure that the communications, the pre-communications and post-communications for the show are threaded up in the same way. So before you come to the experience, you can do on our website, you can do like a little quiz, which will kind of put you in which one of the gangs we think you belong in based off a series of questions. So you can be in Polly Gray's gang, you can be in the Shelby's gang. There's also like a whole women's lib movement that you can join. You can join the Italians, you can join the Jewish gang, whatever it is. And then you wear different colored signifiers, you go do the show. But on that particular night, we like on the show report comes through, the next day, our ticketing and marketing team will basically pick up everybody's data. And then if you got Polly Gray's ending, we will then email you a very specific thread to wrap up Polly Gray's narrative. But if you came in next time and suddenly Alfie won, then you'd get a totally different ending and you get totally different post communications. It was kind of labor intensive, but we felt it was worth it for a guest experience.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Vince, I'm just wondering, do you have kind of any other trends that you are seeing in this space?
Yeah, well, I think that it's funny because like the dome is a trend, like going through the entries, and like obviously the Sphere has been probably one of the most significant immersive venues that has launched ever, just with regards to the amount of hype and the amount of attention and eyeballs that it's gotten. But yeah, seeing that the dome projection is like such a trend, because like I remember back in the early 2000s, the dome projection was a trend. I think we're getting to the point where, with 8K projectors and with like spatial audio and, the type of content we can create in game engine, like these are things that are now making the dome something that is like really attractive. So yeah, that's one that stood out. Obviously AR, is like, big, and is only going to like grow as more headsets become adopted. And I think we're all waiting to see what how Apple does. Not holding our breath too much, but like, it's a great piece of technology. It's just a matter of how many people want to adopt it. But for me, like the big paradigm shift happens once headsets are adopted, and it's an AR paradigm shift, because the difference between experiencing AR through pass-through versus through the screen on your phone is just like, it's a complete difference. It's like the difference between web browsing on your BlackBerry versus web browsing on your iPhone. And so, yeah, obviously there's a lot of work being done to kind of prepare ourselves, I think, for that paradigm shift. And people are starting to adopt AR at a higher level. And then, yeah, I think that I saw the Infinite, which is Felix and Paul's piece in Montreal. It's a location-based VR open world exploration of the International Space Station. And I think that it's the first time that I've seen true open world non-shooting zombies LBE VR experience. And I always kind of had wondered how will this work, and can people do it concurrently, and is it can you get a throughput out of this, and can it be an enjoyable experience? And it does it, and so I think that there's a huge opportunity for open world LBE VR that is not based on holding a gun. And that's a kind of an easy way to get a lot of square footage covered at a lower cost. So I see that as being kind of a huge next step for the immersive industry.
Yeah, some exciting ideas in there. Kirin, what sort of trends are you seeing?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the same kinds of things. To kind of Vince's point, I think that in general, a trend towards more interactivity versus it being a passive walkthrough is something that we're certainly seeing in a lot of experiences. I think that goes back to the conversation we had on agency. Certainly, I mean, I could not be more biased when I say this trend, so take it with a grain of salt. But to Vince's point around AR, we are seeing people, honestly start to work with us today with the idea of they're building towards the future. It's not crazy in these kinds of immersive experiences to say, what is the world going to look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And I think there's a lot of belief that we've seen kind of in terms of shift of headsets are going to be a complete game changer in what these physical experiences look like. And I think the way we've thought about the difference between today and tomorrow from that perspective is on a phone, you don't want to have an immersive experience where the whole time you're walking around like this. That's not that you miss the point, but you can have discrete moments where you add those kind of enhanced experiences or those kind of discovery points throughout a physical experience today. And I think those discrete moments where you might have 10, 100, whatever number of those discrete moments, that becomes continuous when there's glasses, right? Then you walk in, every moment has that potential for digital. So I think a lot of people are leaning in right now to build out the infrastructure, to build the learning of what kinds of stories work, what kinds of experiences work, leaning into that 3 to 5 year kind of glasses vision, especially as we think about the LBE community. So I think that's a big thing that we're seeing in the market today.
Yeah, Neil, obviously I think you've got kind of a slightly different perspective with having that theatre background. What trends are you seeing?
Domes.
You're seeing domes as well.
There's things I can say and there's things I can't say. But let's just say, yes, Vince is right. They're a very hot property and they're a very hot market. And the MSM Sphere in Vegas is doing great guns. I think it'll have another excellent showcase when the Formula One comes to town in about 2 weeks, I think it is. The launch with U2 was pretty great. There's some really good operators of it in the US at the moment. I think the domes operating at different scale. Like you can have a 30,000 square foot dome that fits 4,000 to 5,000 people, or you can have a 12-meter dome that fits 100 people. And those various domes being able to access different venues. I mean, a 20,000 square foot venue, you're going to put on the edge of a city or a town somewhere in a large green space. Whereas a 12-meter dome, you can probably put it in the middle of a shopping centre, depending on its ceiling heights. I went to art school. I spent a lot of money going to art school, and I spent a lot of time standing in empty buildings deciding how high the ceiling is and how many toilets there are. It's a very weird progression for my a lot of building regulations to teach you at uni. The other trend that I'm seeing is more people just want human connection. They kind of want technology to get out of the way, but I'm a man of many contradictions. They want the technology to be so good that it's seamless, that they can interact with it, it just disappears, and then leads to a better human connection. Whether that's with strangers or the people that are attending the events with, they largely just want a human connection. I went to see BBC Earth, the experience recently. It's good. It's all right. but largely it's a lot of people sitting around watching the content on some very impressive screens, but they're mostly there just to have a chat with each other, and they don't really kind of engage. I mean, unfortunately I've not been to the Airwolf shows yet, Vince, but I do absolutely intend to get out there. But I imagine what you see is a lot of people go around, they get immersed in your world, and actually they have shared experiences together. They want to get lost with each other or lost from each other, and then find each other after 15 minutes and go, you'll never believe what just happened to me. And I think that's what people really crave. And whether they know that or not is a different scenario, but it's human connection.
Yeah, we think about that a lot. I mean, a term that we use when we design is inhabitation, like creating a space that people can actually inhabit. Because like when you think about the verb of like what's somebody doing inside of the immersive space, you can think escape room, like, which is like they're solving a puzzle or they're doing a task. You can think in storytelling terms, which is like they're learning about the world that they're in. But we like to even just like make it even more basic than that. Like they're just like living in the world, and so it's always an interesting experience design challenge where you want them to engage with other verbs. Like you want them to choose to like solve the puzzle or choose to learn the story or choose to like, play the musical instrument or whatever. But you want that to be kind of like sitting on top of a foundation of they can just be, they can just chill, they can just inhabit the space. And if you can like kind of keep that as your core foundational experience design, then people like literally get to like leave the everyday physical built world and go into something that is totally radical and be able to exist there with other people. To your point, Neil, like that's where the socializing is best. When you're trying to like program the socializing and try to like force the operationalizing of the social experience, it feels like I'm just kind of a puppet in your in your experience. Whereas if you create an environment where people can, an ecosystem where people can just like exist together, then the socializing happens naturally and the socializing feels genuine and authentic. And then you walk away with like then people walk away with like a real amazing kind of human connection.
Yeah, it's very funny because in Peaky Blinders, there's 89 different ways to watch the show, depending on which character you decide to follow. They've all got 2.5 hours worth of content. They all diverge. And like I said, there's different endings that are triggered. There's 5 bars. 3 of them are secret that you have to work your way into. There's a whole, I was in a show watch last year, and there's a bit where one of the actors is making a proposition to the group of the public, which is effectively that they're going to go and rob the bookies. But as a splinter movement, while somebody's robbing the bookies to cause an distraction, somebody else is going to try and crack the safe and rob all the money from the safe to draw people away from the bookies, so they actually rob the bookies. And like it was a group of absolute random strangers to each other, kind of going, "Yep, cool, this is great." And as they walked away, 2 guys who were they don't know each other from Adam, like, "What are we doing? We're robbing the bookies." Okay, cool. Human connection, even though we're convincing people of theft.
Yeah, I think this all kind of comes back to that point about giving people agency so they can choose. Do they just want to sit and kind of enjoy it? Do they want to go and be more active in that participation? So I think that's probably quite a central kind of experience that you need to have in these immersive spaces so that people have the best possible time they can have. If we look forward a little bit, we've obviously talked about trends, but where do you see the future going for immersive experiences? Obviously, it's had a real boom in the past couple of years in particular. So Kirin, I'm interested, where do you see it going?
Well, building off of, I think, the conversation we've had, and I think, Neil, you hit it on the head of like not feeling like technology is part of the experience, even though it enhances the experience. That's like, I'm probably bordering on fanatical internally on this of like, the reason I care so much about that quality is because there's a really, really good technology should feel invisible, right? Like no one should notice or think, oh, this is a tech experience. It should just be about what that enables. And I think that's where, frankly, AR has really struggled in the past, where it's felt like a sticker or kind of not felt truly immersed in the environment in a meaningful way. I think when we look into the future, one of the things I'm really excited about there's a lot of talk about generative AI and what that means. And I think that's been very centered on a different audience for right now in some ways, if it's very 2D and video image centric. But I think what this enables, if you just think about it purely as the cost to create digital content is going to fall off a cliff, right? As this hits the 3D world, it's going to fall off a cliff. And I think that becomes truly interesting. I think the idea of having really actually personalized potentially experiences as you walk through a physical space, like that wasn't possible even 5-10 years ago. Even today, to some level, you can walk through, and I think 5 years ago the standard would have been, if I went to a theme park today, tomorrow, 10 years ago, it would have been functionally the exact same experience. And now we're moving into a space today where we see this big play of agency of there could be, you said like 80 different endings. There can be all of these different ways to experience and go through a space. I think as we look into the future, there's the potential that it's truly unique, that every single person every time could have almost an infinite number of ways to experience something. As 3D content goes down, as generative AI becomes a part of this, as AR and generative AI come together in particular, I see that as almost limitless potential for what could be created and what experience will look like. So that's definitely where I'm most excited. I think the combination of head-worn devices with generative AI really hitting 3D content, rigging, animation, character development, all of that is going to create a completely new world of immersive experience.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. Vince, where do you see the future going?
Yeah, so that the industry is so new, and I think that the consumer is such a broad general audience. Like it's age 5 all the way up to 95. We have a massive audience that wants to experience things that are immersive. And so I think with that, a key thing that's going to happen is that the audience is going to get smarter about what is quality and what is not, and what's interesting and what's not. Like you can't just say, we have this immersive experience, come check it out, and then show some screenshots of, some Connect driven, projection mapped, wall or something. Like that's not going to be enough 5 or 10 years from now. And I really think the differentiator is going to be the artist. Like it's going to be the creative, and it's a reconciliation that our industry, or not necessarily our industry, but the industry of attractions and theme parks is going to have to come to, because the artist has been left out of the chain so many times along the way. We really look up to large project management firms and large production firms, and we bow down to the technology, and we bow down to the canvas or the medium, and we forget that really what people are going to be attracted to is something that looks unique and something that has a human behind it. So I think AI as a tool, Rafik comes to mind, AI as a tool to create amazing art, but not to the point where the mind or the eye or the hand of the artist is missed. Of course, this is the business model that we have built our whole company on, is that people want to see actual art from actual artists within an immersive space. And yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of goes back to seeing the floodgates open with how many people are doing immersive experiences, and then being I think that the consumers are going to probably start to catch on that a lot of this stuff sucks, and that the answer there is to value the artist and value the creative mind and pay for the artistry behind it, and I'm hoping that that's the trend that we end up seeing, is that the consumers get smarter, and then the IP holders have to respond by actually employing and paying artists what they're worth.
Yeah, that would be a great future, wouldn't it? Neil, where do you see the future going?
I don't know. I'm living for the here and the now.
Where would you like it to go then?
I agree immeasurably with both what Kirin and Vince have said. I'm not worried about AI in any way whatsoever. Just to double down on Vince's point, is you're always going to need and will have to have the guiding hand of an artist. I've seen enough experiences where there hasn't been the guiding hand of an artist, and it's been made by a series of producers. in a production studio somewhere, and you kind of go to it and it just has no soul in any way whatsoever. But I love the work that like Kirin's doing in terms of the delivery of from what I've seen on the website, from the delivery of what the technology that you have is doing. Like I said earlier, I instantly saw synergies of ways that it can weave into live experiences and immersive experiences in the way that, specifically speaking, in the way that we make them. Like every company is different, I suppose. We always make sure that we have a narrative, we have live actors, we in the building of whatever experience or show that we're making, we face so many different challenges, and we overcome them by making up weird solutions, which people kind of go, oh, that's really strange, and we're like, okay, fine, thanks. We just wanted to make work. I do have an answer, which is I think probably the most succinct thing that I could possibly say on this point. I think where we'll find what we will see in the future, or what I would like to see in the future, is that people actually know what immersive is, whether you're the industry or whether you're in the like ticket buying other end kind of it, because nobody really knows. Like when we started making this type of work 20 years ago, there were so many different names that were thrown around. It was site specific, site responsive, site sympathetic. Then we had playable theatre for a while. Playable theatre, I think, is quite accurate. But I think there's a trend in the public at the moment, public perception, that immersive means projectors, and therefore projectors mean immersive, and that might be a narrative that is driven by two very large projection making companies, who I might be doing partnership deals with at the moment, so I can't really name them. But it's a very strange narrative to be going down the road, because I've said this for years, that without narrative, you are just showcasing tech. And I'm not kind of throwing shade in any way whatsoever, but stories are important. People want to engage in a story, and immersive theatre, as it were, as our little subsector of the larger immersive industry, we like people. We like welcoming people into our worlds, and we like getting them to play with our stories, and engaging it and giving them more agency in that way. I think largely, I don't know which direction. It's such a fast-moving industry. I have no idea which way it's going to go. I can see more collaborations between the different immersive makers, though. Whether you're working in AR, VR, lighting, sound, tech. I mean, it's so many amazing things happening at the moment.
And I think it's obviously impossible to say where things are going, but to Vince's point, and a little bit Mule's as well, of my hope would be that the lowering of content costs by generative AI actually allows us to spend more time, energy, focus, and money on core story, core art, right? What I would hope for in the future is that you have this incredible, really well thought out immersive experience driven by creative and driven by an artist, and really about story and experience at its core. And then ultimately like the lowering of budgets of everything around it driven by tech, right? Like the idea that can evolve for different seasons or different times of day, and that becoming functionally free to do. I think that's really interesting, right? As a way to be able to focus resources around ultimately the thing that I think matters the most, and is the thing that people connect with the most, which is the core story experience. I've always firmly believed that. And so I think that's certainly the way I hope this plays out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, there's two things about generative AI that I find really fascinating. One is I went to see Swamp Motel, who are an incredible company that are based here in London, and they do so much. Honestly, their work is incredible. They did a show before last Christmas. Can't remember what it was called. St. Jude, that's what it was called, St. Jude. And that was working with a generative AI. And this is before like ChatGPT 4 like stormed the world back in like February, March this year, whenever it was. So this is pre-Christmas. And I was like, this is incredible. The second thing is about generative AI, whether it's ChatGPT or Midjourney, but particularly ChatGPT, it's kind of like going back to the days of Napster. Like when Napster came out, most people were starting to have home computers. But the difference is that anybody, whether it was like your barber down the street or anybody working in a shop, could go home, sit on their personal computer, and everybody knew how to get Napster on their computer and start downloading music for themselves. And that single moment and that concept of it just becoming a mass new technology that everyone understands very, very quickly completely changed the music industry forever. It's why we now have Spotify, other streaming services are available, and other large-scale streaming services. Is why the music industry now looks what it is. The thing about generative AI is it depends on where we are in the kind of curve of it. If we're like right at the beginning of it and we're kind of at that Napster moment, then we're going to go on this huge peak up, and immersive industries and the world is going to look completely different in 5, 10, 15 years. But if ChatGPT and Midjourney and all the other generative AIs are very much like we are now at the peak of it, then it's just going to be in a decline, and we'll find another new technology to come along, and that will change the world in a different way. It just, I don't know whether we're at the beginning or at the end of that curve. I haven't really seen it yet.
So it's an exciting time. We are nearly at the end of the session, so I just want to finish with just asking, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing at the moment in your business? Vince, I'll start with you.
I think that it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is like, we really do believe in the value of the artists. And we also believe that immersive experiences should be mind-blowing. And that's a tough challenge to deliver, all the time and over and over and over again. And, and with that comes production costs. Like, we want to pay for things. We want to pay for the artistry. We want to pay for things at a high level. We want to do things that are next level, that are mind blowing. And then with that, it's like, well, we also want to keep the experiences within a range that, a ticket price range that everybody can experience. So in that like $35 to $50 range is really good for us. It gets really hard, when we're building a 50,000 square foot, totally immersive, like next level, mind blowing project, and we're charging $45, and then somebody else is just buying a few projectors and projecting on a wall and charging $50. And the market doesn't know the difference between the two. We don't want to say like, oh, actually, we're actually a $75 or $100 experience. That's not going to work for us. That's not the type of business we want to be in. And so I think the toughest thing for us right now is like just the consumer getting to know that there's a difference in value, that there's a difference in level of experience. Like, they got there with cinema, they got there with every other art form, where it's like, oh, I'm not going to go see that movie because it looks like trash. I'm going to go see this one because it looks really good. And, I think we're kind of just like waiting for that to settle a little bit. And 2021 brought some experiences that were like not worth what the ticket price was. And the market didn't know that. And I think that cash grab is something that we're all sort of like in the wake of now at this point, trying to like navigate through.
Yeah. So back to Neil's point earlier, defining actually what that immersive experience is, that could sort of, as an industry, kind of, I think, maybe help everyone sort of move forward a bit. And actually, as you said, Vince, earlier, the consumer is smart. They are going to kind of realize what is worth their money and what isn't. Kirin, what's your biggest challenge?
Similarly, I think it's something we touched on earlier, which is just we're in a mode right now where really our technology can be applied to any venue, right? And I mean anybody who has owned and operated, or just even a physical space that they're operating, theoretically this technology can be applied. And that means we're getting interest from, you mentioned retail, Alice, but there's retail, there's, live events, there's concerts, there's sport, there's, traditional entertainment and theme parks and things of that nature. So for us, it's about where are we focusing our energy, and how are we making sure that ultimately the experiences that are powered from Illumix are at that quality level that we are looking for, right? And I think it's in some ways similar to what Vince is saying. If someone could use the technology and do a horrific job implementing, or have no art or no content or no, like, how can we make sure that the end experiences are as successful as the ones that we've seen before, even as we expand to a much wider range of clients across a number of industries? Is, I think, something that we are really thinking deeply about, of how do we make sure that the experiences can be everything that we can see with our experience without us having to be in there creating the content all ourselves, right? So what does that balance look like for us?
Neil, what's the biggest challenge you're facing?
I don't know. I'm still thinking about what Vince said. Because I know what he's not saying. What's the biggest challenge facing us at the moment? I think, globally speaking, there are certain locations, London, New York, possibly even LA, Singapore, Shanghai, that are oversaturated with experiences. Certainly, like I'm based in London. Well, I live just outside of it, but our offices are in central London. We have done. We're not a London-centric company by any means. Like, we've taken our shows to North America, Australia, cruise ships, Korea, everywhere. But I think some companies do become very centric to their particular location. That location then becomes oversaturated with experiences, and the rest of your territory is kind of left behind in a way. So one of the things that we're actually doing as a company is creating tourable models for some of our shows and portfolio. And some of our new experiences are particularly targeted at going to non-major metropolitan cities on a global scale and going to other places. Because as artists, we care, and we are called the Everywhere Group for a reason. But we care, and we want to take classical music and put it in the middle of your shopping center. But your shopping center doesn't have to be the Mall of America. It could just be like a little mom and pop parade along the way, and we can sit down there for a few weeks. Everyone gets to experience it. But to Vince's point, it's at an accessible price point, and we have to make sure that we make a high enough quality show that we can then retail at an accessible price point. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. We're working on ways around that. But yeah, I think that's our biggest challenge at the moment, is making sure that we don't become so centralized that we actually get it out there to other communities, really.
Well, we are out of time, but thank you all so much. This has been fascinating, and I think has been a really nice dive into, what is an immersive experience, and also, maybe some of the pitfalls that people should avoid, and sort of how they should really center the guest experience, and that concept of story and artistry, I think, is really important. So Vince, Kirin, and Neil, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to reveal the winners of our Immersive Experience Award category after this, so do stick around, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alice.
And now, the winners of the Immersive Experience Innovation Awards 2023. Third place, Dream Machine. Second place, Peaky Blinders: The Rise from the Everywhere Group. And first place, Meow Wolf: The Real Unreal. Congratulations to all of the winners.